I'd spent my career as a digital ghost, scrubbing billionaire secrets until they sparkled. But one reckless signature on a charity auction form turned me from the auditor into the prize. I expected a night of awkward small talk. Instead, I got Caleb Wilder, the CEO of Wilder Global, and a man whose presence feels more like a physical force than a person. When he stands up and bids his entire corporate empire, his skyscraper headquarters, and his ancestral lands just to claim 30 days of my time, the world stops spinning. I'm a fierce woman who doesn't take orders, but as the Alpha King leans in, smelling of cedar and danger, I realize I haven't just been sold, I've been hunted. Chapter 1: The $1 billion Blunder. Going once, going twice, and sold to the gentleman in the back for— Wait, is that a typo? And a private island in the Maldives? The auctioneer's voice cracked, but I was too busy trying to unstick my silk heel from a floor vent to fully process my impending doom. This was supposed to be the experience of a lifetime charity auction. I was supposed to be the one handing over a certificate for a top-tier cybersecurity audit. But as I looked at the oversized screen behind the podium, my heart didn't just drop. It plummeted into the basement. Instead of Emily Horace, digital security package, the slide displayed a candid photo of me, laughing with a glass of champagne, captioned, "Emily Horace, 30 days of unrestricted personal access." I'd spent my entire career being the invisible ghost in the machine, the woman who could scrub a billionaire's digital footprint until it shone. Now, thanks to a funny prank by my soon-to-be unemployed assistant and a very reckless decision to sign the auction paperwork without reading it while caffeinated, I was being sold like a vintage Ferrari. I scanned the room, my face burning. These were the titans of the corporate world, men who thought no was just a suggestion. I needed to fix this. Now. I shoved my way toward the stage, my heels clicking like a countdown clock. "Stop. There's been a massive legal action-inducing mistake," I shouted, reaching the edge of the stage. "I am not a prize. I am an auditor. If any of you actually want to claim me, you'd better be prepared to have your offshore accounts dragged into the light of day." The room went silent. I felt fierce. I felt bold. And then I felt the air in the room change. It wasn't a draft. It was a shift in pressure. From the shadows of the VIP section, a man stood up. He didn't just stand. He commanded the space around him. Caleb Wilder, the CEO of Wilder Global. In the corporate world, they didn't call him a shark. They called him the Alpha because sharks eventually have to stop swimming, but Caleb never stopped taking. He was all sharp lines, tailored charcoal wool, and eyes that looked like they were made of liquid gold and cold calculation. 500 million, Caleb said. His voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the murmurs like a blade through silk. The auctioneer fumbled his gavel. "Mr. Wilder, the current bid is a resort. 500 million is— well, it's significantly more than the GDP of some small nations." "I'm not done," Caleb said, stepping into the light. He didn't even look at the auctioneer. His gaze was locked on mine, heavy and predatory in a way that made my skin tingle with a terrifying heat. "I bid the entirety of Wilder Global's liquid assets, the deed to the Manhattan headquarters, and my ancestral estate in the Highlands." A collective gasp sucked the oxygen out of the ballroom. I froze, my hand still gripping the edge of the podium. "Excuse me?" I managed to find my voice, though it sounded breathy even to my own ears. "You're bidding a kingdom for a month of my time? Mr. Wilder, I'm good at my job, but I'm pretty sure my hourly rate doesn't include corporate takeovers." "You think this is about your rate, Emily?" He started walking toward the stage, his movements fluid and dangerously graceful. There was no violence in him, just an overwhelming magnetic gravity. "You've spent your life hiding in the data. I've spent mine looking for the one person who can't be bought. It seems I've finally found a way to make you mine by giving you everything I own. I'm not for sale, I snapped, my internal fire flaring up to mask the fact that my knees were shaking. You could bid the moon, and I'd still tell you to go audit yourself. Caleb reached the stairs of the stage, stopping just inches from me. He was tall, impossibly so, and he smelled like cedar, ozone, and something primal that made my inner instincts scream danger and closer at the same time. The paperwork is already signed, Emily. You said it yourself. You signed the auction agreement. It's a binding contract in this state. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a low, intimate vibration that I felt in my bones. You wanted to be seen. Now, the whole world is watching. And I am the only one who can protect you from the mess you've just made. I looked out at the sea of cameras. He was right. Reporters were already typing. My reputation was being rewritten in real time. I looked back at him, my eyes narrowing. You think you've won? You've just bought yourself a nightmare in a cocktail dress. I will dismantle your life piece by piece. Caleb's lips quirked into a ghost of a smile, a look of pure, unadulterated challenge. I certainly hope so. My life has been far too quiet lately. He reached out, not to grab me, but to offer his hand. It was an invitation, but with the weight of $1 billion behind it, it felt like a trap. I looked at his hand, then at his golden eyes, realizing that my reckless choice hadn't just cost me my evening, it had just handed the keys to my life to a man who didn't believe in letting go. Just as I reached out to swat his hand away, the heavy oak doors of the ballroom slammed shut, and every light in the building flickered and died, leaving us in a thick, velvety darkness. Emily! Caleb's voice came from the dark, right against my ear. Don't move. They're already here. Chapter 2. The Midnight Extraction. The darkness was absolute, a heavy velvet shroud that smelled of expensive cologne and the sudden sharp ozone of a panicked crowd. Somewhere in the distance a woman screamed, but the sound was muffled, as if the very air had thickened. I didn't move. I couldn't. Caleb's presence was a physical wall at my back, his breath ghosting over the shell of my ear. Who are they? I hissed, my voice barely a whisper. I reached out, my fingers brushing the cold, polished wood of the auction podium. My heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs, but my mind, the part of me that lived for crisis management, was already scanning for exits. The people who realize that for the next 30 days I am technically bankrupt, Caleb murmured. I felt his hand hover near my waist, not touching, but offering a guide. My board of directors doesn't take kindly to their alpha bidding the company's liquidity on a woman who just threatened to dismantle his life. They aren't here to congratulate us, Emily. Wait, you were serious about the bid? I thought that was corporate theater. I stumbled as he steered me toward the back of the stage. My silk dress hissed against the floor. I never bluff. Now move. Left. 3 steps. I followed his voice. In the dark, my other senses flared. I could hear the rhythmic thud of heavy footsteps on the carpeted stairs, measured, professional, and closing in. These weren't panicked socialites. These were security teams. Caleb's hand finally made contact, his palm resting firm and warm against the small of my back. The heat of it shot straight up my spine, a primal jolt that made me want to lean in and bolt at the same time. There's a service elevator behind the velvet curtain, I whispered, my memory of the ballroom layout clicking into place. But it requires a keycard. I saw the caterers using it. I don't need a keycard, Caleb said. We hit the curtain, and he pressed me into the fabric as a beam of a flashlight swept across the stage where we had stood seconds before. I held my breath, on the scent of him, cedarwood, and something deeply, unnervingly wild, filling my lungs. He was so close I could feel the heat radiating from his chest through the layers of his suit. He wasn't shaking. He wasn't even breathing hard. He reached past me, and I heard the groan of metal. Not the click of a lock, but the sound of a heavy steel bolt being sheared by sheer impossible force. My eyes widened in the dark. No human should have been able to pull a locked elevator door open by the seam. "Get in," he commanded. We slipped into the cramped metal box. The emergency lights flickered on, casting a dim red glow over us. Caleb stood over me, his shadow swallowing the small space. Up close, his eyes weren't just gold. They were glowing. A soft amber luminescence that shouldn't have been biologically possible. "What are you?" I asked, my voice finally cracking. I backed into the corner of the elevator, my fierce persona wavering under the weight of his gaze. "That door was reinforced steel, and your eyes. People don't have eyes like that." Caleb stepped forward, closing the gap until the tips of our shoes touched. He didn't look like a CEO anymore. He looked like something that had walked out of a myth and put on a Brioni suit. He leaned down, his face inches from mine, his voice a low, gravelly hum. "I'm the man who just gave up a kingdom for the only woman smart enough to see the cracks in it," he said. "And right now, I'm the only thing standing between you and a board of directors who would very much like to make you disappear to void the contract." "I can take care of myself," I snapped, trying to regain my edge. "I've taken down hackers in Russia and embezzlers in London. I don't need a golden-eyed billionaire playing knight in shining armor." "Good." Caleb smiled, and this time it was all teeth, white, sharp, and predatory. "Because I'm not a knight, Emily, and this isn't a rescue, it's a transition of assets." The elevator lurched, but instead of going down to the garage, it began to rise, higher and higher, bypassing the lobby, bypassing the penthouse. "Where are we going?" I demanded, clutching my clutch bag like a weapon. "The garage is floor G." "We aren't going to the car," Caleb said, looking up as the floor indicator climbed toward the roof. "We're going to the helipad. My estate is 300 miles north, and it's the only place where the laws of man don't apply to the laws of the pack." "The pack?" "Caleb, you're talking like a crazy person. I have a lease. I have a cat." "The cat has already been moved. Your lease has been bought out," he said calmly as the doors hissed open to the freezing night air of the rooftop. The wind whipped my hair across my face, stinging my eyes. A matte black helicopter sat idling on the pad, its blades a rhythmic roar. I turned to run back into the elevator, but Caleb caught my wrist. His grip was like a velvet-lined vice. "Emily, look." I looked. Below us, the gala was surrounded, not by police but by a fleet of black SUVs that bore no markings. Men in tactical gear were pouring into the building. "They aren't just coming for the money," Caleb shouted over the roar of the rotors. "They're coming for the auditor. They know what you found in the preliminary files, Emily. They know you found the kill switch." I froze. I hadn't told anyone about the ghost code I'd found in Wilder Global's mainframe during my 5-minute prep for the auction. How did he know? "How do you know about the code?" I yelled back. Caleb pulled me toward the chopper, his eyes flashing brilliant amber in the moonlight. "Because I'm the one who put it there to see who would try to use it, and you're the only one who didn't try to sell it." He lifted me into the cabin as if I weighed nothing. As the pilot pulled us into the sky, I looked down at the shrinking city, realization dawning on me. I wasn't just an auction prize. I was the bait. "You used me," I whispered, the roar of the engine muffling my voice. Caleb sat across from me, his expression unreadable as we banked north. "I chose you," he corrected. "There's a difference." The helicopter jolted suddenly. A red warning light began to strobe in the cabin. The pilot's voice came over the comms, frantic and high-pitched. "Sir, we've been painted by a ground-to-air lock. They aren't letting us leave the airspace." Chapter 3. The Highland Fortress. The helicopter plummeted. Not a crash, but a terrifying, stomach-churning dive as the pilot pulled a maneuver that should have snapped the rotors. I was thrown forward, my forehead nearly hitting the console before Caleb's arm caught me, pinning me safely against the leather seat. He didn't even flinch as the missile warning screamed in the tiny cabin. "Deploy flares!" Caleb roared. The night sky outside the window erupted in a blinding cascade of white phosphorus. The shockwave of the exploding missile rocked the chopper, throwing us into a tailspin. My vision blurred, the world becoming a kaleidoscope of red lights and Caleb's golden eyes. "Hold on to me," he commanded. It wasn't an invitation. I didn't have a choice. I buried my face in his chest, my fingers digging into the expensive fabric of his suit. He felt like solid granite. He didn't smell like fear. He smelled like ancient forests and a terrifying, calm authority. The pilot managed to level us out just above the tree line, the dark canopy of the upstate forests rushing beneath us like a black sea. We were flying low, too low for radar, hugging the contours of the earth. "They missed," I gasped, my heart trying to leap out of my throat. "They actually tried to blow us out of the sky, over Manhattan." "They are desperate," Caleb said, his hand lingering on my shoulder, his thumb tracing a slow, grounding circle against my skin. "Desperate men do not care about collateral damage. They only care about the fact that you have the decryption key to the Wilder legacy in your head." "I don't have a key. I just saw a line of recursive code that didn't make sense." I shoved him back, trying to regain my space and my dignity, even if I was shaking like a leaf. "And why are you so calm? We almost died." Caleb leaned back, his eyes returning to their human chocolate brown, though the intensity remained. "I don't die easily, Emily, and neither do you. That's why I bid for you. Most people would have fainted the moment the lights went out. You started calculating exit routes." "I'm an auditor, Caleb. We're trained to find the exit," I snapped. I smoothed my ruined dress, my mind already racing. If your board is this violent, then the fraud isn't just financial. It's systemic. Someone is trying to hollow out your company from the inside, and they're using your alpha reputation as a shield. Caleb's expression hardened. "You're smarter than I gave you credit for, which makes you even more dangerous to them." The helicopter began to slow, the roar of the engines changing pitch. Ahead of us, nestled in a valley that shouldn't have existed on any map I knew, was a sprawling estate of glass and dark stone. It looked like a fortress designed by a minimalist architect. There were no fences, but I could see shadows moving in the trees, large, swift shapes that moved with a coordination that made my skin crawl. "Welcome to the rookery," Caleb said as we touched down on a private pad. "My private residence. No one enters without my permission. No one leaves without my protection." "I'm not staying here for 30 days, I said, even as the cabin door opened and the scent of pine and wild earth hit me. "I have a life. I have clients." "You have a target on your back," Caleb countered, hopping out and reaching back to help me down. I ignored his hand and jumped, my heels sinking into the soft turf. "For the next month, you are my guest, my auditor, and my prize, in that order. If you leave this valley, you won't make it to the main road." I looked around. The estate was beautiful, but it felt like a cage. A very expensive $500 million cage. "And what if I refuse to work?" I asked, crossing my arms. "What if I just sit in your guest room and order room service?" Caleb walked toward the house, his gait easy and powerful. "Then you'll be bored. And I know you. Emily Horace, you hate being bored more than you hate being told what to do." He was right, damn him. He led me inside. The interior was all heated slate floors and floor-to-ceiling glass. There were no servants, but the house felt alive. We reached a massive office where a wall of monitors flickered with data. My data. "Everything I've ever worked on," I whispered, walking toward the screens. "You've been tracking me for months." "I've been waiting for you to notice the leak," Caleb said, standing behind me. I couldn't approach you. My enemies watch every move I make. I needed a reason to bring you here that wouldn't look like a consultation. A silent auction was the perfect cover. A cover that cost you your entire net worth? I turned around, my face inches from his. That's a very expensive smokescreen. Caleb, money is just a tool, he said, his voice dropping an octave. He reached out, his fingers grazing my jawline, tilting my face up. But talent and fire, those are rare. I would have paid double. The tension in the room was thick enough to choke on. He was looking at me, not as a billionaire looking at an employee, but as a man who had finally caught something he'd been hunting for a very long time. My breath hitched. The SAS-level tech auditor in me wanted to kick him in the shins. The woman in me wanted to see how far those golden eyes would go. Check the fourth monitor, Caleb whispered, his breath warm on my lips. The code is moving. I tore my eyes away from his and looked at the screen. He was right. The recursive loop I'd found was changing. It wasn't a static fraud. It was a live virus. And it was eating its way through his estate's security system. Suddenly, the monitors turned red. A single word appeared on every screen. Found. The glass walls of the office began to frost over, not from the cold, but from a high-frequency vibration. They didn't follow us, I whispered, backing away from the desk. They were already here. The glass wall behind Caleb shattered inward. Chapter 4. The Primal Protocol. The glass didn't just break. It exploded into a billion shimmering diamonds. Caleb was a blur of motion, spinning and shielding me with his body before the first shard could touch my skin. I braced for the impact, for the sound of a struggle, for the metallic tang of blood, but there was nothing. Caleb stood perfectly still, his back to the shattered wall. He wasn't bleeding. In fact, the shards of glass seemed to have bounced off his suit as if it were made of Kevlar. Standing in the ruins of the window was a woman. She was tall, dressed in a sharp white suit that contrasted sharply with the jagged glass at her feet. She wasn't holding a weapon. She was holding a tablet. Honestly, Caleb, she said, her voice dripping with bored sophistication. The dramatic entrance was necessary. You've been ignoring my calls for 3 hours. The board is in an uproar. Caleb's shoulders relaxed, but the tension didn't leave his frame. Sasha, you're lucky I didn't kill you before you opened your mouth. And miss your chance to explain why you're currently trending as the world's most expensive simp? Sasha stepped over the threshold, her eyes flicking to me with a mix of curiosity and disdain. So, this is her, the $500 million wallflower. I'm the auditor who's about to find out which of your offshore accounts paid for that suit, Sasha, I snapped, stepping out from behind Caleb. My adrenaline was still spiking, but the lack of actual violence made my sass return with a vengeance. And for the record, it's $1 billion wallflower. Get your figures right. Sasha's eyebrows shot up. She looked at Caleb. I see why you like her. She has a death wish. She has a brain, Caleb corrected. He turned to me, his eyes still shimmering with that faint, unnatural amber. Emily, this is Sasha, my chief of staff. She's one of the few people I trust. Usually. The virus, Sasha, Caleb said, his voice turning cold. The screens went red. They found us. Sasha's smirk vanished. She looked at her tablet. Impossible. I've been running the ghost protocol the entire way here. No one could have tracked the signal. It wasn't a signal, I said, pushing past them both to get to the main terminal. My fingers flew across the keys, bypassing the red warning screens. It's a proximity trigger. The code isn't just in your system, Caleb. It's in your hardware. It's a physical bug, likely embedded in something you carry with you every day. Caleb reached for his watch. A heavy, obsidian-faced piece. He looked at it, then at me. Give it to me, I said. He unbuckled it and handed it over. I didn't even look at the craftsmanship. I grabbed a heavy paperweight from the desk and smashed the face of the watch. Hey, that was a limited edition? Sasha started. Found it, I interrupted. From the wreckage of the watch, and I pulled a microscopic sliver of translucent material. It wasn't silicon. It looked like organic matter, pulsing with a faint rhythmic light. This is biotech. It's not just tracking your location, it's tracking your vitals, your heart rate, your adrenaline levels, your pheromones. I looked up at Caleb, a cold knot forming in my stomach. This isn't corporate espionage. Someone is trying to map your biology. They're trying to prove what you are. The room went silent. Even Sasha looked pale. Caleb walked toward me, his presence suddenly overwhelming. He took the sliver of biotech from my hand and crushed it between two fingers. A small puff of gray smoke rose from his grip. Now they know I know, Caleb said. And they know I'm the one who found it, I added. Which means I'm officially the most dangerous person in this room. In this room? Emily, you're the most dangerous person in the hemisphere, Caleb whispered. He stepped closer, his hand coming up to rest on the wall behind my head, effectively pinning me against the desk. Because you just proved that my secrets aren't safe from you. And I have spent 30 years making sure no one ever saw the man behind the CEO. Maybe you should have thought about that before you bid your kingdom for me, I said, my voice barely a breath. My heart was racing, and I knew, he could feel it. The way he was looking at me. It wasn't about the company anymore. It was about the fact that I'd just stripped him bare without even touching him. I knew exactly what I was doing, he said. His gaze dropped to my lips, and for a second, the world narrowed down to the heat between us and the sound of the wind howling through the broken window. Suddenly, a low, guttural howl echoed from the valley below. It wasn't a wolf, at least, not any wolf I'd ever heard. It was deep, resonant, and filled with a terrifying, mournful hunger. Sasha's face went bone white. The enforcers. They've breached the valley perimeter. Caleb didn't move away from me. If anything, he pressed closer, his eyes turning a brilliant, burning gold. They're too early. I haven't officially forfeited the assets yet. They aren't waiting for the paperwork, Caleb, Sasha cried. They're here to take the prize by force. Caleb looked at me, a dark, fierce smile playing on his lips. Let them try. Emily, get into the safe room. Sasha, get the servers on lockdown. I'm not going into a safe room, I said, grabbing my laptop. If I'm the prize, I'm the one who gets to set the terms of the engagement, and I've got a digital bomb that'll make their enforcers wish they stayed in the shadows. Emily, Caleb started, but I was already halfway to the server room. Audit this, Alpha, I yelled over my shoulder. I reached the server door, but, as the biometric scanner read my palm, the floor beneath me gave way. Chapter 5. The Glass Queen. I didn't fall far, maybe 10 feet, but I landed on something soft and incredibly expensive. I blinked, my lungs searching for air, and realized I was in a sub-basement I hadn't seen on the blueprints. It was a library, but not the kind with dust and old paper. The walls were lined with thousands of glass vials, each containing a different scent, and the floor was covered in plush white faux fur rugs. Emily! Caleb's voice roared from above. I looked up to see him silhouetted against the hole in the floor. He looked ready to leap down after me, but a blur of white silk. Sasha grabbed his arm, pointing toward the shattered window where shadows were now pouring into the office. I'm fine, I yelled, scrambled to my feet. There's a secondary terminal down here. I can lock the house down from the sublayer. Stay there, Caleb commanded, his voice vibrating through the floorboards. Do not move until I come for you. Yeah, right, I muttered, turning to the terminal. This room was different. It felt personal. It didn't smell like the rest of the house. It smelled like rain on hot asphalt and crushed mint, my favorite scent. I paused, my hand hovering over the keyboard. Why would Caleb Wilder have a room that smelled like me? I shook the thought away and started typing. The security system was a mess of hijacked protocols. Whoever was attacking wasn't just using brute force, they were using Caleb's own alpha permissions against him. Come on, I hissed, my fingers dancing. If I can just reroute the bioauth to my own signature. I was so focused on the screen that I didn't hear the vent cover slide open. I didn't hear the soft, padded landing of something heavy. You really shouldn't have looked so hard, Emily. I froze. The voice was smooth, cultured, and definitely not Caleb's. I turned slowly. Standing by the glass vials was a man I recognized from the gala, Fred Horace. No relation, but he was the head of the rival firm that had tried to outbid Caleb. He looked perfectly composed, except for the way his shadow seemed to stretch and distort against the wall, taking on a shape that was far too large and far too hairy to be human. Fred, I said, keeping my voice steady, I assume you didn't take the stairs. The stairs are for people who follow the rules, Fred said, walking toward me. He didn't have Caleb's magnetic gravity. He had a oily, predatory slickness. I'm here to offer you a better deal, Emily. Caleb gave up his kingdom for you. I'm willing to give you his head. Tempting, I said, my hand slowly reaching for the heavy glass paperweight I'd shoved into my dress pocket earlier. But I have a strict policy against working with men who smell like wet dog and desperation. Fred's face contorted. For a split second, his jaw seemed to lengthen, his teeth sharpening into a row of jagged ivory. You don't understand what you're involved in. This isn't a corporate merger. This is an evolution. Caleb is a relic. He thinks he can live in both worlds, the boardroom and the woods. But the moon is rising, Emily. And the moon doesn't care about stock options. I don't care about the moon, I snapped. I care about my contract. And my contract is with Wilder Global. I swung the paperweight. It caught him square in the temple, a satisfying thud echoing through the room. Fred stumbled back, but he didn't fall. He just laughed, a low, raspy sound that turned into a snarl. Fierce, he whispered, his eyes glowing a sickly, pale yellow. I see why he wants you. You have the spirit of a matriarch. He lunged. I dove under the library table, my heart screaming. I wasn't a fighter, I was a strategist. I needed a distraction. I grabbed a handful of the scent vials from the shelf and smashed them against the floor. The room was suddenly flooded with a chaotic explosion of scents. Lavender, gasoline, rotting meat, jasmine, ozone. Fred stopped, clutching his nose and howling in agony. His senses were too sensitive. The sensory overload was like a flashbang to his brain. Emily! The ceiling above us finally gave way. Caleb dropped down, landing between me and Fred. He didn't look like a CEO anymore. His suit was shredded at the shoulders, and his hands were tipped with thick black claws. He didn't say a word. He just let out a roar that shook the very foundations of the house. Fred backed away, his face half shifted into something monstrous. You're weak, Caleb. You're protecting a human while your empire burns. My empire is wherever she is, Caleb growled. He moved faster than I could follow, a blur of shadow and gold. He didn't strike Fred, he simply grabbed him by the throat and slammed him into the wall with enough force to crack the stone. Leave, Caleb whispered, the word more of a vibration than a sound. Before I forget that I promised her no violence. Fred scrambled out through the vent, his eyes wide with genuine terror. Caleb stood there for a long moment, his chest heaving, his claws slowly retracting. The scent of the broken vials was still heavy in the air, but through it I could smell him. Raw, wild, and protective. He turned to me. He looked horrified at what I'd seen. Emily, You're a werewolf, I said, sitting on the floor amongst the glass shards. I wasn't screaming. I wasn't fainting. I was just processing. That explains the bidding, the eyes, the smell. And the fact that you just tore a stone wall with your bare hands. Are you going to run? He asked, his voice trembling. I looked at the terminal, then back at him. The audit isn't finished, Caleb, and I never leave a job half done. I stood up, brushing the glass from my skirt. But if you ever hide something like that from me again, I will leak your browser history to the entire planet. Clear? Caleb blinked, a look of pure shock on his face. Then he laughed. A real, deep laugh that made my heart do a traitorous little flip. Clear. Now, get me back to that terminal, I said, pointing to the screen. We have a company to save. But as I reached for the keyboard, the screen flickered. A new message appeared, one that made my blood run cold. Remaining liquid assets, $0. Ownership, transferred to the council. Caleb's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, his face going grim. It's not over, he said. The council just invoked the primal succession. They aren't just taking the company, Emily. They've just put a bounty on the alpha's mate. The what? I asked, my voice rising. They think you're my mate, Caleb said, his golden eyes locking onto mine with a terrifying intensity. And in our world, the only way to claim a kingdom is to kill the queen. Outside, the sound of 100 howls rose from the valley, closer than before. Emily, Caleb said, reaching for my hand, we need to go. Now. Where? To the one place they can't follow, he said, pulling me toward a hidden door behind the shelves. To the origin. But as the door opened, a figure stood waiting for us. It was Sasha, but she wasn't holding a tablet anymore, and she was holding a silver collar. I'm sorry, Caleb, she whispered. But the council offered me a seat. Chapter 6. The Silver Betrayal. Sasha's face, usually a mask of corporate perfection, was twitching with a frantic, desperate energy. The silver collar in her hand shimmered with a dull moonlight glow, a metal that felt wrong just to look at, like a toothache for the soul. Sasha, don't do this, Caleb said, his voice dropping to a dangerous, low vibration. He didn't lung. He knew the properties of that metal. I could see the way his skin crawled just by being in its proximity. The council doesn't give seats, they give leashes. You know that better than anyone. They offered me a legacy, Caleb, not just a paycheck and a view of your back. Sasha's voice rose to a shrill peak, echoing off the glass vials in the sub-basement. I spent 5 years hiding your tracks, scrubbing the wolf out of your digital footprint, and for what? To be outranked by an auditor you bought at a gala? I stepped forward, my laptop tucked under my arm like a shield. Sasha, look at the math. If the council is seizing assets, they're liquidating the inner circle first. You aren't getting a seat. You're getting audited. And trust me, I've seen their ledger. You're listed as an expendable liability. Sasha's eyes flickered to me, a moment of doubt crossing her sharp features. That was all the opening I needed. I didn't have claws and I didn't have silver, but I had a very heavy, very expensive bottle of ancient forest perfume I'd swiped from the shelf. I hurled it at her feet. The glass shattered, and a concentrated cloud of pine resin and heavy musk exploded between us. To a human, it was a strong scent. To a werewolf's hypersensitive nose, it was a chemical weapon. Sasha shrieked, dropping the collar to claw at her nose and eyes, her white suit instantly stained by the amber liquid. Caleb didn't hesitate. He grabbed my waist and hauled me through the hidden door behind the shelves, slamming it shut and engaging a manual bolt that looked like it belonged on a submarine. That won't hold her for long, Caleb panted. He looked diminished, his movements stiff. The proximity to the silver had drained the golden glow from his eyes, leaving them a flat, pained brown. What was that thing? I asked, stumbling as we navigated a narrow, stone-walled tunnel that slanted steeply downward. The air here was cold and damp, smelling of old earth and something metallic. Silver nitrate alloy. Caleb spat. It's designed to paralyze our nervous system. If she'd gotten that on me, I'd be a decorative rug by morning. He stopped, leaning heavily against the damp stone. Emily, you need to listen to me. The origin isn't a place. It's a server. A physical, air-gapped drive buried under this mountain. It holds the true record of the council's founding, and the proof that their royal bloodlines are as fabricated as a $3 bill. Wait, so the whole alpha hierarchy is a scam? I asked, my inner auditor suddenly very, very interested. You're telling me this entire supernatural shadow government is based on a fraudulent audit trail? Exactly, Caleb said, a grim smirk returning to his face. They aren't the chosen ones. They're just the ones who got to the ledger first. If you can broadcast that data, and the bounty on your head vanishes because the authority that placed it becomes illegitimate. Then let's go blow some minds, I said, adjusting my grip on my laptop. We moved deeper into the mountain. The tunnel opened into a cavern filled with humming black monoliths, the air-gapped servers. This was a digital cathedral, cooled by the natural mountain spring water that rushed in channels along the floor. I need 10 minutes, I said, dropping to the floor and plugging in. If you can keep the door closed, I can rewrite the history of your species. Caleb turned toward the tunnel we'd just exited. The sounds of scratching and howling were getting louder. The enforcers had found the sub-basement. I'll give you 20, Caleb said. He began to strip off his shredded suit jacket, his muscles rippling and expanding. The no-violence rule was about to be tested, but as he looked back at me, his eyes flaring into a brilliant, blinding gold, he didn't look like a monster. He looked like a guardian. Emily, he said, his voice a guttural growl. Whatever happens, don't stop typing. I opened the first file. My eyes widened. Caleb, the council didn't just fabricate their bloodlines. They've been siphoning the primal essence from the lower packs for decades. They're literal parasites. A massive boom shook the cavern. The stone door at the end of the tunnel cracked. A gray furred hand, twice the size of a human's, forced its way through the gap. 10 minutes, Emily! Caleb roared, his body shifting into a massive bipedal form that towered over the servers. I didn't look up. I dove into the code, but as I bypassed the final firewall, a message popped up on my screen that wasn't part of the server. Hello, Emily. We've been expecting a Horace to return home. Chapter 7. The Horus Inheritance. My fingers froze over the keys. The message on the screen wasn't a system prompt. It was a legacy protocol, dormant for a century, reacting to my biometric signature through the keyboard. Horace? I thought, my mind spinning. My father had been a quiet accountant in Jersey, my mother, a librarian. There were no origins in my family tree, just spreadsheets and late-night bridge games. Emily, the wall! Caleb's roar echoed through the chamber. I looked up just as the stone door exploded into fragments. 3 enforcers, massive, hulking shadows of fur and teeth, poured into the room. They weren't like Caleb. They were mindless, driven by a frenzied bloodlust that smelled like rot. Caleb met them in the center of the room, a whirlwind of gold and gray. He wasn't using claws to kill. He was using his massive strength to shove them back into the water channels, using the terrain to keep them at bay without spilling blood. He was holding the line, but he was outnumbered. Emily, the data! He yelled, his voice strained as he held 2 enforcers by their throats, his muscles bulging with the effort. I turned back to the screen. I didn't have time to process my family history. I had to kill the council's power. I bypassed the Horace prompt, forcing my way into the core directory. The data was there. Every transaction, every stolen bit of essence, every forged birth certificate. It was the ultimate corporate takedown. Uploading, I whispered, the progress bar crawling forward. 10%, 20%. You're making a mistake, child, I spun around. Fred Horace was standing at the edge of the server light, his yellow eyes glowing with a sickening familiarity. He wasn't shifting. He was holding a remote detonator. "Fred," I spat, "still trying to buy what you can't earn?" "I'm not here for the company, Emily. I'm here for the blood," Fred said, his gaze fixed on me with a terrifying intensity. "Why do you think I was at that auction? Why do you think I bid against Wilder? It wasn't for a night with an auditor. It was for the last Horus, the only ones who can actually lock the ledger." I looked at the screen. The upload was at 50%. "The council didn't steal the essence, Emily," Fred laughed, a dry, rattling sound. "The Horuses gave it to them. Your ancestors were the wardens of the pack. They were the ones who decided who was Alpha and who was Omega. You aren't a victim of this world. You're its architect." "I'm a freelancer," I snapped, "and I don't work for free, especially not for genocidal wolves." I hit a key, sending a command to the mountain's cooling system. The water in the channels began to flash freeze, the temperature in the room dropping 40 degrees in seconds. The enforcers, their fur wet from the spring water, began to slow, their limbs stiffening as the ice took hold. Caleb, seeing the move, broke away from the fight and leaped toward me. "Emily, the upload!" "It's at 80%, I yelled. Fred snarled, his face twisting into a snout. He didn't lunge for me. He lunged for the server's power cable. If he cut the power, the data would be corrupted, and we'd be trapped in the dark with a room full of freezing, angry wolves. "No!" I scrambled across the desk, grabbing the only weapon I had left, the silver nitrate collar Sasha had dropped, which Caleb had kicked toward me earlier. I didn't put it on him. I threw it like a frisbee. The silver circled Fred's neck, snapping shut with a magnetic click. He let out a choked, wet gurgle, his transformation reversing mid-stride. He collapsed to the floor, the silver burning into his skin. "The Horus legacy ends with you," he wheezed. The progress bar hit 100%. Across the world, every tablet, phone, and computer connected to the Wilder Global Network and the hidden council intranet began to scroll with the truth. The alpha myth was dead. Caleb stood over me, his breathing heavy, his golden eyes slowly fading back to brown. And the enforcers had retreated into the shadows of the tunnel, their connection to the council's command broken by the data leak. "You did it," Caleb whispered, reaching out to brush a stray hair from my face. His touch was trembling. "You broke the world, Emily." "I just balanced the books," I said, my legs finally giving out. I slid down the side of the server, Caleb catching me before I hit the stone. But as the silence of the cavern settled, a new sound began to echo from the monoliths, a rhythmic, electronic heartbeat. "The servers," I whispered. "They aren't shutting down. They're rebooting." A new message appeared on the screen, in a font that looked like ancient calligraphy. "The Regency is over. The Queen has been identified. Protocol. Crown initiated." Caleb's face went pale. "Emily, what did you just trigger?" "I didn't trigger anything," I said, watching as the cavern walls began to glow with a soft blue light. "The data didn't just go out, it invited something in." A holographic figure began to form in the center of the room, a woman who looked exactly like me, dressed in furs and holding a digital staff. "Welcome home, Emily," the hologram said. "The pack is waiting for your first command." Chapter 8. The Weight of the Crown. Caleb backed away from the hologram, his posture shifting from protector to something closer to awe or terror. It was hard to tell. "The Queen?" I echoed, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. I looked at the holographic woman, my double, my ancestor, and felt a wave of nausea. "I'm an auditor. I don't do queens. I don't even like being the head of a HOA." "The protocol isn't a suggestion, Emily," the hologram said, her voice a perfect melodic echo of my own. The Horus bloodline was engineered to provide the neural interface for the pack mind. Without a Horus at the center, the wolves revert to their base instincts: chaos, violence. What you call the council was just a group of opportunists trying to fill the silence you left behind. I didn't leave anyone behind, I shouted at the light. I was born in New Jersey. Your grandmother fled the rookery during the Great Purge, the hologram continued, unfazed. She chose a life of spreadsheets to save you from the burden. But the code is in your marrow. By releasing the truth, you've deactivated the dampeners. Every werewolf on the planet can feel you right now. Caleb groaned, clutching his head. He dropped to one knee, his golden eyes flickering wildly. She's right, he gasped. It's like 1,000 voices just went quiet, waiting for a single breath. I knelt beside him, my hand on his shoulder. Caleb, fight it. Don't let some ancient software tell you what to do. It's not software, Emily, he whispered, looking up at me. His expression was a mix of agony and a strange, terrifying devotion. It's home. I've been looking for this frequency my whole life. I looked at the hologram. Shut it off. I don't want it. Release them. I cannot, the hologram replied. To release them is to let them tear the human world apart in their confusion. Without the Queen's stability, the change becomes permanent. They will never be CEOs again. They will only be beasts. I looked at Caleb. The thought of him, the sharp-witted, arrogant, brilliant man who bid his kingdom for me, turning into a mindless animal forever. It wasn't an option. What do I have to do? I asked, my voice cold. Accept the bond, the hologram said. Anchor the alpha of alphas. Use him as your conduit to stabilize the global network. 1 month of total synchronization. 30 days as the auction promised. I looked at Caleb. 30 days of unrestricted personal access, I whispered. The auction wasn't a mistake. Someone knew. I didn't know, Caleb said, reaching for my hand. Emily, I swear. I just knew that when I saw your face in that file, I felt like I could finally breathe. Fine, I said, standing up and facing the hologram. I'll do it. But we're doing this my way. No thrones, no fur, no weird chanting. This is a corporate restructuring, and I'm the CEO of the species now. Agreed, the hologram said, and then it dissolved into 1,000,000 points of light that swirled around us, sinking into our skin. The sensation was like being plugged into a high-voltage line. My mind expanded, stretching across the globe. I felt the pulse of the pack in London, the hunger of the wolves in Tokyo, the fear of the strays in Chicago. And at the center of it all, I felt Caleb. His heart, his thoughts, his deep, soul-shattering love for a woman he'd barely met. It was too much. It was beautiful. We need to get to the penthouse, I said, my voice sounding deeper, more resonant. The council's remnants will try to strike before the synchronization is complete. We left the cavern, hearing the enforcers now bowing their heads as we passed. We took Caleb's private jet back to Manhattan, the city lights below looking like a circuit board I finally knew how to program. We entered the Wilder Global penthouse just as the sun was beginning to set, casting long orange shadows across the marble floors. The silence was eerie. Sasha, Caleb called out. No answer. We walked into the center of the room. On the mahogany desk sat a single, silver rose. Its petals were sharpened to a razor edge. A message from the council, Caleb whispered. The Black Rose Protocol. It means they've hired a specialist. A specialist for what? I asked. For a queen who doesn't want to play, a voice said from the balcony. A man stepped out of the shadows. He wasn't a werewolf. He was human, dressed in a simple black tactical suit. He held a small, glass vial filled with a shimmering blue liquid. The Horace bloodline is a biological hazard, the man said. I'm here to neutralize the threat, Not with silver, Emily. With a cure. Caleb lunged, but the man was faster. He didn't use a gun. He threw a small, pressurized canister at the floor. A blue mist filled the room. "Caleb, no!" I screamed. As the mist touched Caleb, he didn't shift. He didn't roar. He simply collapsed, his skin turning a sickly, pale gray. "The cure kills the wolf, Emily," the specialist said, walking toward me. "But it kills the host, too." Chapter 9. The Heart of the Machine. Caleb lay motionless on the white marble, the blue mist curling around him like a toxic ghost. I scrambled to his side, my hands hovering over his chest. He was cold. Too cold. The vibrant heat that had defined him since the gala was vanishing, replaced by a terrifying, hollow stillness. "What did you do?" I hissed, looking up at the specialist. My vision was blurring, not from tears, but from the raw, white-hot fury vibrating in my marrow. The Queen protocol within me was screaming, a digital and biological siren call for a retribution I didn't know I was capable of. "I ended the cycle," the man said, his voice devoid of emotion. He pulled a second vial from his belt. "The Horus-Wilder symbiosis is a glitch in the natural order. Without him to anchor you, the Queen signal will burn out your brain in approximately 6 hours. You'll die a human, and the wolves will finally be free to fade into extinction. No more monsters. No more alphas." "He's not a monster," I growled, standing up. I felt the air in the penthouse begin to hum. The glass walls vibrated. The specialist took a step back, his eyes widening as the electronics in the room began to spark. "He's the only man who was willing to lose everything to find me." I didn't need a laptop. I didn't need a keyboard. I reached out into the air, my fingers twitching as I manipulated the smart home interface through the neural link. "System override," I commanded. My voice didn't sound like mine anymore. It was a layered polyphonic resonance. Code: Emily Horace 0. Atmospheric purge. Activated. The high-tech ventilation system groaned to life, a massive vacuum roar sucking the blue mist out of the room in seconds. The specialist lunged for me, but I didn't move. I didn't have to. I flicked my wrist, and the heavy, motorized velvet curtains swept across the room, wrapping around him like a shroud, pinning his arms to his sides with the force of the industrial motors. "You think you're the cure?" I walked toward him, the floor crackling under my heels. "You're just a bug in the system, and I've spent my life deleting bugs." I didn't hurt him. I didn't have to. I simply placed my hand on the curtain over his chest and used the building's security feed to broadcast his face, his coordinates, and his mission to every police precinct in the city, along with a tidy file of his previous neutralizations. "The police will be here in 3 minutes," I said, my voice returning to normal as the adrenaline began to recede. "They won't find a monster. They'll find a hitman." I turned back to Caleb. He was still gray. His heart was a faint, irregular stutter. "Caleb," I whispered, pulling his head into my lap. "Don't you dare leave me with this kingdom. I don't know the first thing about running a pack. I still haven't audited your 2025 tax returns." I closed my eyes, reaching into the Queen link. I could feel the global network, the thousands of werewolves I was now tethered to. I need a bypass, I thought, a biological jumpstart. The essence, the holographic voice echoed in my mind. The essence the council stole. It is stored in the Manhattan Vault, 3 floors below you. It is the only thing that can neutralize the cure. 3 floors, I muttered. I looked at Caleb. I couldn't leave him, and I couldn't carry him. I looked at the silver rose on the desk. Its petals were sharpened to a razor edge. Silver. The one thing that could cut through the Queen's protection. I grabbed the rose. "Emily." "Don't." Sasha's voice came from the doorway. She looked haggard, her white suit ruined, her eyes filled with a desperate, lingering guilt. "The vault is timed. If you open it without the council's key, the whole building goes up." "Then give me the key, Sasha," I said, holding the silver rose to my own palm. "Or watch me bleed out and take your seat with me." Sasha looked at the rose, then at Caleb's gray face. She slumped, her shoulders dropping. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small obsidian disc. "I never wanted him to die," she whispered. "I just wanted to be important." "You were his friend," I said, snatching the disc. "That was the most important thing in this building. You threw it away for a chair." I ran for the elevator, the obsidian disc acting as a master key. I hit the button for the subvault. The doors closed, and for a second, I was alone in the silence. 30 days, I thought. We're only on day 2. The elevator hissed open. The vault was a cathedral of gold and steel. In the center, a single glass cylinder glowed with a pulsating golden light, the collective essence of 1,000 alphas. I approached the cylinder. The obsidian disc fit perfectly into the slot. "Release," I commanded. The glass didn't shatter, it dissolved. The golden light didn't flow, it leaped. It surged into me, a tidal wave of primal energy that felt like a sun exploding in my chest. I screamed, my vision turning into a blinding golden white. I felt Caleb's heart. I felt the moment it stopped. "No." I channeled every bit of the light through the neural link, pushing it through the air, through the floorboards, whoosh through the very molecules of the building. I didn't send it to the pack. I sent it to him. Upstairs, a massive boom shook the skyscraper. I collapsed on the vault floor, my skin glowing, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I waited for the silence. I waited for the bond to break. But instead, I heard a sound through the intercom, a sound that was low, gravelly, and beautifully arrogant. "Emily? Why is the penthouse glowing? And why do I suddenly feel like I could eat a skyscraper?" I laughed, tears finally stinging my eyes. "Stay there, you idiot. I'm coming up." I scrambled into the elevator, my heart soaring. We'd done it. We'd survived the cure, the council, and the specialist. But as the elevator climbed, the doors suddenly jammed between floors. The lights flickered and died. A voice came over the speaker, not Caleb's, not the holograms. It was a child's voice, sweet and terrifyingly calm. "The Queen found the light," the voice said, "but the light has a shadow, and the shadow is hungry." The floor of the elevator began to melt into a black, viscous liquid. "Emily Horace," the voice whispered. "Did you really think the Horace family was the only one that survived the purge?" The black liquid rose to my knees. Chapter 10. The Underkingdom. The black liquid wasn't just cold. It was an absence of heat, a void that seemed to drink the very light from my skin. It clung to my legs like hungry silk, pulling me down into the floor of the elevator as if the steel had turned to quicksand. My queen connection, usually a roaring bonfire of global voices, suddenly felt muffled, as if I'd been plunged into a tank of oil. "Caleb!" I screamed, but my voice didn't echo. It was swallowed by the dark. "He can't hear you, Emily," the child's voice whispered, vibrating through my very bones. "He's too busy being a king. But a king is just a soldier in a crown. A queen. A queen is the gateway." I reached for the elevator control panel, but the metal had gone soft, stretching like taffy under my fingers. I wasn't an auditor anymore. I was a fly in a web. I took a deep breath, forcing my panic into a small, cold box. Think, Horace. Think. If this was a shadow of the Horus legacy, it wasn't magic. It was the inverse of the frequency I'd just mastered. It was the white noise to my broadcast. "You're a Horus too," I gasped, the liquid rising to my waist. "The shadow of the family. The part of the audit trail that was deleted." A small figure shimmered into existence in the corner of the elevator. It looked like a young boy, maybe 10 years old, dressed in a Victorian-style suit that was as black as the liquid. His eyes weren't gold or brown, they were perfect reflective mirrors. "I am the archive," the boy said. "I am everything your grandmother tried to burn. She wanted a world of spreadsheets and safety. But the pack doesn't want safety. They want the moon." "The moon is a rock, kid," I snapped, my fierce side flaring up despite the fact that I was currently sinking into a literal abyss. "And I don't care how many Victorian ghost stories you've stepped out of. You're interrupting a very expensive 30-day contract." The boy's mirror eyes flickered. "The contract is void. Wilder Global has no assets. Caleb Wilder is a man of straw. But you have the essence of 1,000 alphas in your blood. If I take you, I take the kingdom. You want to audit?" "I'll give you an audit," I growled. I didn't try to pull myself out. I did the opposite. I submerged my hands into the black liquid, reaching out with the golden queen energy I'd just absorbed from the vault. I didn't fight the shadow. I flooded it. "You're an archive?" I shouted, the golden light beginning to leak from my eyes and fingertips. "Then process this." I dumped every raw, unfiltered emotion I'd felt since the auction. The terror of the gala, the thrill of Caleb's bid, the heat of our near misses, the agony of seeing him gray and cold, directly into the boy's frequency. It wasn't a tactical strike. It was a sensory nuke. The boy shrieked, his mirror eyes shattering. The black liquid began to boil, turning from ink back into cold, hard steel. The elevator shuddered, the emergency brake screaming as the mechanism fought to regain its grip on the world. The darkness vanished in a flash of blinding gold. The elevator doors groaned and slid open. I fell out onto the carpet of the executive hallway, coughing and shivering, my skin still humming with residual energy. "Emily!" Caleb was there before I could even find my feet. He looked vibrant, more alive than I'd ever seen him. The golden essence I'd sent him had done more than just cure the poison. It had refined him. He looked like a man who could rewrite the laws of physics with a glance. He scooped me up, his arms a familiar solid heat against my cold skin. "I felt you disappear. It was like the sun went out." "Shadow Horaces," I wheezed, clutching his shirt. A kid in a suit. Mirror eyes. "Caleb, the audit trail goes deeper than the mountain. There's a whole underkingdom that's been waiting for the throne to be occupied." Caleb's face went grim, but he didn't look afraid. He looked ready. "Then we'll audit the shadows together." He carried me into the penthouse. The specialist was gone, taken by the police, and Sasha was nowhere to be seen. The room was quiet, the city lights of Manhattan sparkling outside like a field of fallen stars. Caleb set me down on the edge of his massive mahogany desk. He didn't pull away. He stayed close, his hands resting on my waist, his golden eyes searching mine. "The 30 days," he whispered. "The auction is over, Emily. The council is dead, the company is in probate, and the pack is waiting for a command." "I told you," I said, my voice finally steadying. I reached up, my fingers tracing the sharp line of his jaw. "I'm the CEO now, and my first order of business is a long overdue meeting." "About the company?" "About the man who bid a kingdom for a girl who liked spreadsheets," I said, a small, fierce smile playing on my lips. Caleb leaned in, his forehead resting against mine. The queen link was still there, but it was quiet now, a soft hum in the background of our own heartbeat. "I'd bid it all again," he whispered. "Every skyscraper, every acre, just for this." I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. I pulled him down into a kiss that tasted like cedar, gold, and the start of a very different kind of empire. We weren't just a CEO and an auditor anymore. We weren't just a king and a queen. and we were the glitch in the system that the world would never be able to fix. I looked over his shoulder at the computer monitors. They were still scrolling with the Crown protocol. But as I watched, I saw a new line of code appear, one that hadn't been there before. Sector 11. The archive is waking. The Regency has just begun. I smiled against Caleb's lips. Let them come. I had the alpha of alphas by my side, a billion-dollar brain, and 28 days left on my contract. And I never leave a job half done. Thank you so much for getting lost in another world with us today. I hope Emily and Caleb's story kept your heart racing until the very last second. Before you go, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below and let me know which part of the world you're listening from. Our community here at Eliana's Romance Library spans the globe, and I love seeing where our listeners call home. If you're craving more and just can't wait for the next drop, consider joining our library membership. As a member, you'll get exclusive early access to all our new uploads, plus full batch releases so you can binge your favorite stories without the wait. Until next time, keep the romance alive, and I'll see you in the comments.